When Marcus got into that car for the fourth time, he realized the driver was also aware of what was happening, but neither of them knew how it was possible. Marcus Chen stood at the intersection of Route 66 and Highway 40 in Arizona, watching the digital clock on his phone display 2:47 p.m. The desert sun was merciless, and he'd been waiting for a ride for almost an hour. His water was running low, and the next town was still 30 miles away through empty desert landscape. But Marcus had no idea that he was about to experience something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about reality. A blue Ford Explorer approached from the east, slowing down as it neared his position. Marcus felt the familiar surge of relief that came with any potential ride in the desert heat. The SUV pulled over, and through the passenger window Marcus could see the driver, a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and concerned eyes. She was wearing a white t-shirt and had a water bottle in the cup holder next to her. "Need a lift?" she called out. "Definitely," Marcus replied, jogging toward the vehicle. "I'm heading west. Anywhere in that direction." "Perfect. I'm going to Flagstaff. I'm Sarah, by the way." Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, grateful for the air conditioning. "Marcus, thanks for stopping." As they drove through the Arizona desert, Sarah seemed like exactly the kind of person who made hitchhiking worthwhile. She was a nurse, she explained, driving home after visiting her parents in Albuquerque. She asked about Marcus's travels and shared stories about her own adventures. The conversation flowed naturally as they passed red rock formations and endless stretches of desert highway. They talked about music, travel, life on the road, and the unique beauty of the American Southwest. But as they approached Flagstaff, something strange began to happen. Marcus started feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. Not just the familiar feeling of having been somewhere before, but a very specific, detailed recollection of having this exact conversation, in this exact car, with this exact person. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "have we met before?" Sarah glanced at him with a puzzled expression. "I don't think so." "Why?" "It's probably nothing. I just feel like we've had this conversation before." Sarah laughed. "Maybe we're just compatible travelers. Sometimes you meet someone and it feels like you've known them forever." As they entered Flagstaff, Sarah pulled over at a gas station on the edge of town. "This is where I need to turn off," she said. "Good luck with the rest of your journey, Marcus." Marcus thanked her, grabbed his backpack, and got out of the SUV. He watched Sarah drive away, then looked around to get his bearings and figure out where to position himself for his next ride. That's when something impossible happened. Marcus blinked and suddenly he was standing at the intersection of Route 66 and Highway 40 again. The digital clock on his phone displayed 2:47 p.m. The same merciless desert sun. The same empty highway stretching in both directions. He stared at his phone, convinced there must be some kind of malfunction, but everything else seemed normal. His backpack, his water bottle, his position on the road. Then he heard the sound of an engine approaching from the east. A blue Ford Explorer was slowing down, and through the passenger window, Marcus could see a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and concerned eyes, wearing a white t-shirt with a water bottle in the cup holder. "Need a lift?" Sarah called out, exactly as she had before. Marcus stood frozen, staring at her. This was impossible. He'd just gotten out of her car in Flagstaff. He'd just had this exact conversation. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, looking concerned. Marcus forced himself to speak. "Sarah?" Her expression changed to surprise. "How do you know my name?" But Marcus was too confused to answer coherently. He climbed into the passenger seat, his mind racing through possibilities. Was he losing his sanity? Having some kind of breakdown? Was this a dream? The conversation proceeded exactly as it had before. Sarah explaining she was a nurse, asking about his travels, sharing stories about her adventures. Every word, every gesture, every laugh was identical to what had happened before. And Marcus realized that Sarah had no memory of their previous encounter. As they approached Flagstaff again, Marcus felt a growing sense of panic. If this was some kind of loop, what would happen when they reached the gas station? Would it start over again? Sarah, this is going to sound crazy, but I think we've done this before. Done what before? This drive, this conversation, all of it. Sarah looked at him with genuine concern. Marcus, are you feeling all right? You've seemed a little strange since you got in the car. They reached the gas station, and Sarah pulled over in exactly the same spot as before. This is where I need to turn off, she said, repeating her previous words exactly. Good luck with the rest of your journey, Marcus. Marcus got out of the car, but this time he watched more carefully. Sarah drove away, and he looked around at the gas station, trying to notice every detail. Then he blinked again, and he was back at the intersection. 2:47 p.m. Desert sun. Empty highway. This was the third time. But when the blue Ford Explorer approached and Sarah called out, "Need a lift?" Marcus noticed something different in her expression. A flicker of recognition, confusion. "Sarah," Marcus said as he approached the car, "do you remember me?" She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see something changing in her eyes. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I just dropped you off in Flagstaff." Finally, someone else was experiencing it too. Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, and they sat in silence for several minutes, both trying to process what was happening. "Marcus, I remember our conversation. I remember everything about our drive. But according to my GPS and my clock, that was now. It hasn't happened yet?" "This is the third time for me," Marcus said. "The first 2 times you didn't remember." Sarah's hands were shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. "This doesn't make sense. People don't just repeat experiences. Time doesn't work that way. But it's happening. We're both experiencing it." Sarah started driving. But this time, the conversation was completely different. Instead of talking about travel and music, they were trying to figure out what was causing their temporal loop. "Do you have any medical conditions?" Sarah asked, her nursing training kicking in. "Head injuries? Medication that might cause hallucinations?" "Nothing. I'm healthy." "What about you?" "Same. I'm a trauma nurse. I know the signs of psychotic episodes, hallucinations, dissociative disorders. This doesn't match any of them." As they drove, they began comparing their experiences, trying to find clues. But what they discovered would make the situation even more mysterious. "Marcus, when did you first start feeling like something was wrong?" "Right before Flagstaff, during our first drive. I got this intense déjà vu feeling." Sarah nodded. "I felt it too, but I dismissed it. I thought it was just because we were having such a natural conversation." "What exactly do you remember about the end of our first drive?" "I dropped you off at the gas station. You thanked me and walked away. I drove home." Sarah paused, frowning. "But that's the strange part. I don't remember arriving home. I don't remember the rest of my day." They reached Flagstaff again, and Sarah pulled into the same gas station. But this time, instead of saying goodbye, they sat in the car and waited. "What happens if we don't follow the pattern?" Marcus asked. "I don't know, but I'm not ready to find out yet." They waited for 10 minutes, talking quietly about their situation. Nothing unusual happened. Cars came and went. People filled up their tanks. Everything seemed normal. "Maybe it's over," Sarah said hopefully. But as soon as she spoke those words, they both blinked and found themselves back at the intersection. 2:47 p.m. Fourth time. "Need a lift?" Sarah called out, but her voice was different now. There was recognition and confusion in her expression. "You remember this time too," Marcus said as he got into the car. "All of it. Every loop. This is impossible, but it's happening." But the fourth loop would reveal something neither of them expected. As they drove, Sarah suddenly pulled over to the side of the road. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something I didn't mention in the previous loops." "What?" "This morning, before I left Albuquerque, I was in a car accident." Marcus felt a chill despite the Arizona heat. "What kind of accident?" I was driving to my parents' house when a truck ran a red light and hit my car. I remember the impact, the sound of breaking glass, and then—" She paused, her face pale. "Then I was standing in my parents' driveway, completely uninjured, like nothing had happened." The implications of what she was telling him were staggering. "Sarah, what time did the accident happen?" She checked her phone. According to the timestamp on the photo I took of the damage, they stared at each other in silence, both understanding what this might mean. "Marcus, what if we're not in a time loop? What if we're—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. "What if we're dead?" But their investigation was about to reveal something even more disturbing. "If we died at 2:47 p.m., why are we experiencing this specific scenario over and over?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. But Marcus, I need to ask you something. Did anything unusual happen to you today? Before you started hitchhiking?" Marcus thought back to his morning, and suddenly a memory surfaced that he'd somehow forgotten. "I was walking along the highway early this morning when I saw a car accident. A blue SUV had been hit by a truck. There were paramedics, police, the whole scene." Sarah's face went white. "What did the SUV look like?" It looked exactly like your car." They sat in stunned silence, both trying to process the implications. "Marcus, describe the scene." "Everything you remember." "There was a woman in the driver's seat, blonde hair, about your age. She wasn't moving. The paramedics were working on her. But—" Marcus stopped, realizing what he was saying. "But what?" "But I don't think she made it." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a photo from her gallery. "Is this the car you saw?" It was identical to the one they were sitting in, down to the small dent in the front bumper that Marcus had noticed earlier. But the mystery was about to get even deeper. "Sarah, if you died in that accident this morning and I saw it happen, then how are we both here now?" "I don't know. But Marcus, I need to tell you something else. When I picked you up at the intersection, you looked familiar. I thought maybe we'd met before, but I couldn't place where." Marcus felt another wave of recognition. What if I was in the accident too?" "What do you mean?" "What if I wasn't just witnessing the accident? What if I was involved somehow?" As they sat there trying to piece together the truth, Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. She looked at it and gasped. "It's a news alert. 2 dead in highway accident near Route 66 intersection. Victims identified as Sarah Mitchell, 34, and Marcus Chin." They stared at the phone screen, reading their own obituary. But the article contained details that neither of them remembered. The accident occurred at 2:47 p.m. when Mitchell's SUV collided with a semi-truck, after swerving to avoid a hitchhiker who had walked into the roadway. Both Mitchell and the hitchhiker who had been struck by the vehicle were pronounced dead at the scene. Marcus felt a crushing weight of realization. "I caused the accident. You swerved to avoid hitting me. And that's what killed us both." "Marcus, no. It was an accident. You didn't mean for it to happen. But it's my fault you're dead. If I hadn't been walking in the road, if I hadn't put you in a position where you had to choose." Sarah reached over and took his hand. "We're both here now. Whatever this is, whatever's happening to us, we're experiencing it together." But their situation was about to take an unexpected turn. "Marcus, what if this loop isn't punishment? What if it's an opportunity?" "What do you mean?" "What if we're being given a chance to understand what happened? To find some kind of peace with it?" As they sat there, both dead but somehow still conscious, still experiencing this strange repetition of their final moments, Marcus began to understand something important. "Sarah, in each loop we've gotten closer to the truth. First I was confused, then you started remembering, then we both began to understand what happened. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we needed to work together to figure it out." They decided to experience one more loop, but this time with full knowledge of what they were and what had happened. When they found themselves back at the intersection for the 5th time, everything felt different. "Need a lift?" Sarah called out. But this time her smile was peaceful rather than confused. "I'd like that," Marcus replied, and they both understood that this wasn't about transportation anymore. As they drove through the desert one final time, they talked about their lives, their regrets, their hopes. They shared the kind of conversation that people have when they know it might be their last. "I'm sorry," Marcus said as they approached Flagstaff. "I'm sorry that trying to help me cost you your life. And I'm sorry that I couldn't avoid the accident. I'm sorry that our paths crossed in such a tragic way." But instead of arriving at the gas station, something different happened. The road ahead began to shimmer and fade, like heat waves rising from the asphalt. The desert landscape gradually dissolved, replaced by something that looked like a vast, peaceful expanse of light. "Marcus, I think this is it," Sarah said softly. "Are you afraid?" "No. Are you?" Marcus considered the question. "No, I think I understand now. We were given this time together so we could both find peace with what happened." As the last remnants of the highway faded away, they could hear voices in the distance, paramedics, police officers, family members who had come to the scene of the accident. Sarah Mitchell was driving home from visiting her parents when the accident occurred. Marcus Chen was a traveler who had been hitchhiking across the country. Witnesses said Mitchell tried to swerve to avoid the pedestrian, but there wasn't enough time. But those voices seemed far away now, like echoes from another world. "Thank you," Sarah said to Marcus. "For what?" "For helping me understand. For sharing this with me so I didn't have to face it alone. Thank you for stopping to help me, even though it cost you everything." As the light grew brighter around them, Marcus realized that the time loop hadn't been a prison. It had been a gift. A chance for two strangers whose lives had intersected in tragedy to find understanding, forgiveness, and peace. The blue Ford Explorer, Route 66. The Arizona desert. All of it faded away, leaving behind only the knowledge that sometimes the most important journeys aren't about reaching a destination, but about who you travel with and what you learn along the way. Marcus had gotten into that car for the fourth time, not as a hitchhiker looking for a ride, but as a soul seeking redemption. And Sarah had offered him that ride not as a good Samaritan helping a stranger, but as a fellow traveler trying to make sense of an impossible situation. In the end, they had both found what they were looking for. The loop was broken not by escaping it, but by understanding why it existed in the first place. Sometimes the most important conversation you'll ever have is with someone you'll only meet once. And sometimes that conversation takes place in the space between one heartbeat and the next, in the moment when time stops and eternity begins. The highway stretched on forever, but Marcus and Sarah were no longer traveling it. They had found their way home. But before the light could fully embrace them, something unexpected happened. The peaceful expanse began to shift and change, forming new shapes and colors. Marcus and Sarah found themselves standing at what appeared to be the same desert intersection where their story had begun, but everything was different now. The harsh Arizona sun had been replaced by a gentle golden light. The asphalt road now gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting the sky above in perfect clarity. "Where are we?" Sarah asked, though her voice carried no fear, only curiosity. "I think we're exactly where we need to be," Marcus replied, feeling a sense of completeness he'd never experienced before. As they stood there, other figures began to appear along the highway. Some were walking, some were standing by the roadside with their thumbs extended, others were sitting in cars that seemed to exist in a state between solid and translucent. "They're all travelers," Sarah realized. "But they're not alive." Marcus nodded, understanding flooding through him. "This is where people like us come. People whose journeys ended unexpectedly." One figure approached them, an elderly man wearing a worn leather jacket. His eyes held the same peaceful clarity that Marcus now felt within himself. "First time here?" the man asked with a gentle smile. "We just figured out what happened to us," Sarah explained. "We died in a car accident, but we've been experiencing the same moment over and over." The elderly man nodded knowingly. Time works differently here. What matters isn't how long you spend, but what you learn while you're here. I'm Henry. How long do people stay? Marcus asked. Until they're ready to move on. Some figure it out quickly, like you two seem to have done. Others need more time to process their endings. But Henry had more wisdom to share. This place gives you time to see your story from every angle as part of a larger tapestry. The scene around them shifted. Marcus and Sarah found themselves observing their accident from multiple perspectives. They saw Marcus that morning, suffering from heat exhaustion but pushing himself to reach his sister's graduation. They saw Sarah leaving early because the hospital needed her for an emergency shift. We were both trying to help people, Sarah realized. They watched the accident unfold with complete clarity. Marcus, disoriented and dehydrated, stumbling into the road. Sarah, seeing him at the last second and choosing to swerve. Three people making the best choices they could, Henry observed. Just humans being human. They also saw how their deaths had affected the truck driver, Michael Santos. He had quit his job, started drinking, and was spiraling into depression. He's destroying himself over something that wasn't his fault, Marcus said. Then maybe he needs help seeing what you've learned, Henry suggested. The scene shifted to Michael's apartment, where he sat alone with whiskey, staring at newspaper clippings. I should have been able to stop, he was saying. Marcus approached him. Michael, it wasn't your fault. The truck driver looked up, startled. Who's there? My name is Marcus Chen. I died in the accident. Michael's face went white. You're not real. I am dead, Marcus confirmed gently. But I'm here to tell you, the accident wasn't your fault. Sarah became visible. Michael, I'm Sarah Mitchell. You had 2 seconds to react when I swerved. No one could have stopped in that distance. They talked with Michael about forgiveness, about the difference between guilt and responsibility. Gradually, Michael relaxed. I feel lighter. Live your life, Sarah said. Honor our memory by being the good man you are. Michael nodded, tears streaming. I promise. As they faded from his apartment, Marcus and Sarah returned to the eternal highway. Helping others heal is often the final step in healing ourselves, Henry said. Your final act of peace was helping someone else find theirs. Marcus felt golden light surrounding them. Are we ready? Sarah asked. Marcus took her hand. I think we are. As the light embraced them, they heard Michael calling a grief counselor, taking his first step toward healing. The time loop had been preparation for whatever came next. Sometimes the most important journey is the one that teaches you how to help others find their way home.